Here at JoBlo Horror Originals, we talk a lot about gateway horror films. Depending on the generation you belong to, that can be a few different things. Kids of the 70s will always have Jaws as an introduction to horror, and that movie is still a great way to introduce newer generations to the genre after almost 50 years. Two of my favorites from the 80s, and two films that both my sons have seen, are The Gate and The Monster Squad. Again, both great and both still hold up as not only fun horror flicks, but great ways to ease in the younger crowd. Myself, being born in 1985, I'm much more of a child of the 90s, so even if you hadn't read the title of the video you clicked, you could probably guess that I saw Jurassic Park in theaters. It scared and enthralled me and made me want more. It became a billion-dollar franchise just in films, but spawned comics, video games, toys, amusement park attractions, and nearly everything else you can license. But before that, it started as a massive blockbuster novel from one of sci-fi's greatest, and the adaptation was a sure thing. Both are regarded as musts in their respective medias, but which is better, and how did they get it from page to screen? Hold on to your butts as we see if the creators were so preoccupied with if they could adapt this work that they never asked if they should, as we find out what happened to this adaptation. Steven Spielberg already had a relationship with famed author Michael Crichton before they worked on the film adaptation of Jurassic Park together. The two actually worked on creating the TV show ER, and that's when Spielberg learned of his author pal's idea about dinosaurs being brought back to life for a theme park. Crichton, who was ever the smart businessman, knew what his 1990 novel had the potential to be, so he asked for $1.5 million and a fairly large percent of the movie's theatrical gross for the option rights. Warner Brothers, 20th Century Fox, and Columbia all threw out bids along with their top talent to direct, with Tim Burton, Joe Dante, and Richard Donner respectively all in the mix. Universal would win out with Spielberg, who famously had done a blockbuster or two before, with James Cameron apparently just missing out hours before the bidding was won. The author was given an additional $500K to write the first screenplay. That screenplay wasn't the final product, although Crichton was given a credit for his work. After Hook screenwriter Amalia Marmo was given a go at it in 1991, the studio decided to also bring in David Koepp to further tweak the screenplay. While Crichton felt that only 10 to 20% of the book would be able to be put on screen, Koepp was able to make it so only a couple major scenes were left out. Even, as you'll see, the movie is still quite different from the book overall. Koepp has a long and fun resume that also includes Carlito's Way, The Shadow, the first Mission Impossible movie, Panic Room, and Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man, to name just a few. Spielberg is obviously a known entity, and his other movies that dip their toe into horror or suspense are also mostly great, with Duel, Jaws, and War of the Worlds all being worth your time. Crichton, as we discussed in Congo, also has Westworld, The Great Train Robbery, which was based on his book, and boy did I screw that up last time, Coma, and Looker, to name only a few. The cast here is iconic in their roles, enough to bring back over and over again, but many of them were not the first choices. Sam Neill would play Dr. Alan Grant, but that role almost went to William Hurt, Kurt Russell, Richard Dreyfuss, Harrison Ford, and Tim Robbins. Neill has also done great genre work with In the Mouth of Madness, Dead Calm, Possession, and The Omen 3. Laura Dern was the first choice for Dr. Ellie Sattler, but it almost went to Robin Wright, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Helen Hunt. Dern hasn't done much horror, but did show up in Grizzly 2, and Inland Empire is nightmare fuel. Jeff Goldblum beat out Jim Carrey, Richard Attenborough was the only choice for Hammond, and Wayne Knight was cast after Spielberg saw his performance in Basic Instinct. The movie was released wide on June 11, 1993 on a $63 million budget and, to put it lightly, became one of the biggest films of all time. After a couple re-releases, it sits at over $1 billion at the box office and won all 3 Oscars it was nominated for, with Best Sound, Best Sound Effects Editing, and Best Effects for Visual Effects that went to greats like Stan Winston and Phil Tippett. Also lost in the awards shuffle is an incredible score from John Williams. As stated before, there were immediate toys, video games, comics, and the movie series continues with its 7th iteration coming out in 2025. We discussed Michael Crichton at length last time, so let's focus a bit more on the development of the book itself. Crichton actually wrote the first version as a screenplay in 1983 about a graduate student who ends up recreating a dinosaur. This changed when he felt that the science behind it would be extremely expensive, and there was no practical need for a dinosaur. People will still do things when they don't make any sense.
Now let's push this giant ball of oil out the window.
So the author reasoned that dinosaurs would be brought back as entertainment, and so the theme park angle was thrown in too. The book was originally from the perspective of a child, but anyone that read the first few drafts felt an adult's view would capture more and make a little more sense. It is seen as a Frankenstein allegory, with Dr. Henry Wu tinkering with things he doesn't understand by bringing back the dinosaurs from extinction without actually knowing about what they will do, or in some cases, what to even call them. It follows a similar vein in that humanity pays the price for the carelessness of men playing God. The characters were seen as mostly inserts and not very well fleshed out, and that's something that Crichton had to deal with his whole career, but the entertainment value and understandable science behind the scenes made it more palatable. Crichton would actually release a sequel called The Lost World that would also get the movie treatment that would also be directed by Steven Spielberg. While Crichton would be productive in books and film for a good while after, Jurassic Park will always be the first line of his legacy. There is an accident that has to do with the impending opening of a nature preserve/theme park called Jurassic Park that is being planned to be opened and funded by John Hammond. He has found a way to bring dinosaurs back by extracting their DNA from fossilized mosquitoes that have been stuck and preserved in amber. The investors in the park have become worried due to these issues and ask for specialists in specific fields to be brought in to sign off on the opening to the public. These include paleontologist Alan Grant, paleobotanist Ellie Sattler, mathematician Ian Malcolm, who specializes in chaos theory, and lawyer Donald Gennaro. The park has light staffing that includes main engineer Arnold, biotech Henry Wu, game warden Robert Muldoon, lead park vet Harding, and main programmer Dennis Nedry. The park is also hosting Hammond's grandchildren Tim and Lex. A tour begins and weather begins to get bad while Nedry turns off all the security in the park and steals DNA samples as he thinks he is underpaid and underappreciated by Hammond.
I don't work in the rain.
He's acting as a spy and covert employee for Biosyn and Agent Lewis Dodson.
Dodson! We've got Dodson here! So nobody cares.
Who is chief rival to Hammond's InGen. The power being shut down results in the tour group being attacked and the race being on to get off the island. The dinosaurs have also somehow begun to breed, which was thought impossible due to the nature of them being brought back by science, but it's theorized that the extra DNA that was used to fill the gap by frogs was a species that could change their gender, and the dinosaurs have also done this. Several of the characters die in the process, including Nedry by a Dilophosaurus, Arnold by raptors, and others, but the group eventually does make it off the island while avoiding T-Rex and Velociraptor attacks. Apologies to my oldest son and one of my closest friends who are reading the book soon, but here be spoilers. I won't go into every single detail as this isn't that type of video and it would be too long, but while the main idea and story are the same from page to screen, the journey and many of the characters are quite different. The opening incident in the book is an attack on a child in Costa Rica that initially is the reason that Grant and Sattler are brought in, to identify the injuries to specific animals. The movie opens with an accident while moving some of the dinos into the park, and it's a very Spielberg scene and reminiscent of Jaws. Another smaller change that doesn't make or break for the title is that Hammond's grandkids are switched around a bit, with Tim being older than Lex, and also the one that can hack security, while Lex is the little sister. Getting into some of the bigger plot changes, we have Grant and the kids taking a river back to the main center to try to escape, as well as an end scene with several characters using nerve gas to kill off the remaining raptors in the book. In terms of characters, Harding has a much larger role in the novel, and the character of Gennaro plays the role of two characters in the book. While Donald Gennaro is the lawyer from the book, he's also a strong and caring character who makes it to the end and helps save people and destroy dinos. The character that shares a similar death as well as the cowardly aspects of movie Gennaro is publicist Ed Regis, who does not exist at all in the movie. Characters also have different fates from the two worlds, with Muldoon living in the book, but Wu, Malcolm, and even Hammond all dying in different ways. Finally, the character of Hammond is also more of a careless villain in the book as opposed to his movie counterpart, who is stubborn, but ultimately understanding and cares more about the people than the park. There are loads of other changes, but the big ones make the two different enough experiences to hopefully get you to explore both. It's difficult to say which one is better, particularly when they're as different as these two are. I remember reading the book in high school almost 10 years after watching the movie and being very confused. I personally think this is one of the rare cases where the movie is objectively better than the book, but I can easily see where if you read the novel first, that would be your preference. Both are mandatory to read and watch, and you will be entertained either way. There are also countless other avenues to quench your Jurassic needs should you want more. As Weird Al said, Jurassic Park is frightening in the dark, but this is also a trip worth sparing no expense for.